So Melinda, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Glad to be here, Allison.
I appreciate it. So obviously Melinda Gates, the co-founder of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, founded in 2000. You've spent billions trying to solve some of the world's toughest problems. You're an author of a new book called The Moment of Lift, which is all about empowering women and how actually if you lift up women, it improves the world on multiple levels, from boosting the economy, taking people out of poverty, saving children from dying, all sorts of things. And you've also had 3 different careers. You were a high-powered Microsoft executive, you are a philanthropist, and you're a full-time mother to 3 children. You've had a great mentor, it sounds like, in a woman named Patty, who helped show you that you could be yourself. Unfortunately, I think that there's pressure to conform to how your boss acts, maybe. And there have been studies that show that if you don't act the way your boss acts, they promote people who remind them of themselves. So do women need to conform to be like men? Is it always possible to be yourself and be a leader?
I think it really depends on what the culture of the company is that you work for. And I think that if you find yourself under a boss who's not supportive, as fast as you can move under somebody else, I think the better off you're probably going to be, unless you can work with them. I also know other women who've talked to me who work at companies now, young women who are in their early 30s, who say, okay, I haven't had the most supportive boss in the environment I'm in, but if my colleagues and I get together, and not just a group of women, but men and women, to give that person feedback, and if they're open and they hear it from multiples of us, then sometimes they'll start to change. So I think the burden is both on the corporation to change, or if it's government to change, and on the individual to say what's right for me and what is it that I want. But it goes both ways.
So there are 2 things that you talk about in your book, feelings that a leader should have. One is empathy, and one is actually love. One of the topics that people don't like to talk about is love. You call it the greatest agent for change that there could be, and yet you never hear politicians talk about it. You never hear bosses talking about it. Should we bring love into the workplace and into management? What do you think about those 2 things?
Well, I talk about empathic leadership, and I believe in being compassionate to everybody around you. And so whether you talk about love explicitly or not, I think it's what you do to role model. So when you have the employee who has a death in their family, or has a loved one, a mother or father who's ill, or a young child they're caring for, I think it's in how you respond to them as a manager, or in reverse, that shows your humanity. And people are basically, I think the best organizations are ones where people can show up as their full selves at home and at work, and that they don't have to hide parts of themselves. Now, it doesn't mean if you're going through something emotional at home that you want to bring all of that to work. You do have to manage your own emotions. But I think the more we let everybody be themselves, the more we will have empathic leadership. And to me, that ultimately is, when you reach out and connect with somebody over their humanity, that ultimately is love, whether you name it or not.
So this idea of unpaid work is basically anything that you're doing that's basically not your leisure. You're doing it for your household, you're doing it for your family. In the US, it might be laundry, and other places it's sometimes walking miles to a well to get water for your family. So it's this huge problem, and actually it was found that it would be the biggest sector of the economy if all this unpaid work counted, right?
Right.
It's unbelievable. And you found that even in your own home, there was some unbalance in responsibilities.
I'm going to be the first one to say, look, I'm incredibly lucky. I can have somebody else, if I choose, purchase the groceries or help with childcare. I've had amazing support and help with child rearing. But there are still things that we do in our home that I wanted to make sure we did as parents, and that our kids participated so they would know what it was to grow up and have what it was like to have responsibilities.
So do you still do family dishes?
We still do family dishes. In fact, right now, our youngest daughter, our 2 older ones are out of the house now. Our youngest daughter is actually in Peru right now. So last night it was just Bill and me for dinner, and we did the dishes together after dinner.
Amazing. And I love the story too of Bill driving your children to school and the effect that had on all the other parents at school. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so when our oldest daughter Jen was starting kindergarten, we both agreed the school we thought she should be in long term. It was not close to our house. It was a good drive away from our house. And I was making the argument that, gosh, there are going to be so many years of driving, maybe we just wait and delay and put her in that school when she was a little bit older. And Bill was really quite adamant that he thought she should start then. And so I said, but the amount of driving, to and from 5 days a week. And he said, well, I'll drive then. And I said, you'll drive. And it meant him leaving our house, going to where her school was, and then driving back past our house to Microsoft. So it was quite a commute. And so he started doing this twice a week. And about a few weeks into the school year, some other moms kind of sidled up to me and they said, hey, do you see what's changing in the classroom? And I said, yeah, I'm seeing more dads kind of dropping off. They're like, yeah. We went home and we told our husbands, if Bill Gates, who's the CEO right now, can drive his kid to school, so can you. And so I hadn't even realized that this moment that Bill and I had at home of negotiating who was going to do what and me naming what was going to be hard and what was needed and Bill stepping up and saying, I'll do it 2 days a week, we inadvertently role modeled for other families something that was right. And what I will tell you is Bill and the kids cherished those moments in the car. I mean, listening to music together, the conversation over many years that they had, it's a side of him that of them and him for them, they might not have seen otherwise. It would have been a missed opportunity. It was beautiful.
So I want to dig into a couple stories in the book that were really, really powerful. And one is the story of this woman, Mina. And you decide that poverty is a huge problem you want to solve, you want to help tackle, because the biggest unjust thing in the world is if a parent who doesn't have as much money as someone else has their child suffer or potentially even die. So tell me about the story of this woman, Mina.
Yeah, I met Mina in northern India, and she had just given birth to a beautiful little baby boy in a health facility that we had been part of supporting. And so I was at Mina's home with she and her husband and her 2 little boys, and she had this beautiful infant in her arms. And we were talking about her experience, which had been very positive, and we'd gone through all of that. And then, so near the end, I said to her, so what are your hopes and dreams for your sons? And she just looked down for a long time, and she went very sullen after we'd had this glorious conversation. And then she finally looked up at me and she said, the truth is, I have no hope for my son, none. And she said, my only hope would be is if you took him home with you. And all she knew was, I'm there as a Western woman in a pair of khaki pants and a t-shirt, and she just knows that life will be better for her son. And she ended up saying, take both of them. She thought their lives would be better if I took them back to the United States. And it's heartbreaking to be in these situations and to see parents who are doing their absolute best, but because of their circumstances, can't feed and educate their kids. And I think that's something we can do something about as a world, and we should do something about it.
That's unbelievable. I mean, she essentially asked you to raise her 2 children while holding one. That is the desperation that you're seeing.
And she clearly loved those boys.
One thing that I was really impressed by is that you're trying to change traditions or help people think about traditions that maybe shouldn't exist any longer, and then introduce new ones. Cutting was one tradition that you have helped change, and then skin-to-skin contact is something that is basic, it seems like, for mothers here in the US, but not everywhere. Talk about how you're changing mindsets.
Yeah, I mean, I think the way as society grows and learns is to take on new knowledge and then advance society. We're trying to do that in the United States. I would suggest we still have quite a distance to go till we get full equality in the United States. But yes, in other cultures that we go in with partners who've been on the ground, say 30 years working in these communities. And what we try to do is to bring new knowledge and sometimes new tools from the United States, like a vaccine they haven't had before, and then educate the community and let them decide do what they want to take on these new norms or traditions or tools because they will save their children's lives. And it's up to them in the end to decide. Skin-to-skin contact, what we call Kangaroo Care, where you take a newborn and as soon as it's born, you put it on the mom's chest and you wrap it up in a blanket and you put it there. It is a life-saving technique, and it was proven out in the developing world before it came back to the United States. So in the US, we were overusing incubators for kids. And once it got proved out in other places, we brought it back to the US, and now it's become part of the standard care practice. And what we know about skin-to-skin contact is the mom and the baby bond more, her milk lets down sooner, and it saves the baby's life, particularly like in places in northern India where you give birth and it's cold. a child, needs to be kept warm, or they're at risk for all kinds of things like pneumonia.
In America, and certainly in all other parts of the world, there is this huge issue of the growing wealth divide. Ray Dalio, hedge fund king, recently said that he thinks it's a national emergency. You have so much concentration of wealth and so many people who are increasingly having not enough, and the middle class, which you were raised in, is being wiped out. What is the solution here? I mean, how bad can this get?
I think the solution is a different taxation policy. The truth is we need to update our tax code in the United States. The wealthy in this country should be paying higher taxes than the middle class. And
like higher than 70%?
I'm not going to name a number. I'm not a tax policy expert, but I definitely think the high-income people should pay more tax. And you can do it there's lots of different ways and different forms to do it in, but then middle-class people should pay more than low-income. But even in Washington state, we're one of the most what we call regressive tax states. And I think it's time around the U.S. that we looked at taxes at the national and the state level.
So you're the world's best problem solver, I would say. You're tackling problems that seem impossible. What is your strategy for problem solving?
To surround yourself with experts, and then to go out in the field and really do site visits and really hear from people on the ground what they want and how interventions will or won't change their lives. And it's only by taking the latest, greatest innovations in science and surrounding yourself with those people and understanding people's lives that I think you can eventually create change.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Melinda. It's been so fun.
Thanks, Allison.